So much about supporting our babies when they're young is also about supporting us. And often that comes down to your nervous system. Can you be regulated enough to co-regulate with your baby in order for them to fall asleep more easily? In this episode, I get to talk with Dr. Nerina Ramlakhan. Dr. Nerina is a physiologist and a sleep therapist. Our conversation is absolutely lovely as we delve into the nervous system, into safety science, into how to use tools and strategies that she has developed in order to regulate our nervous systems for better sleep and for better life in general. This was an interview I recorded back in July, bright and early in the morning, because she is from England. So at 5:30 in the morning, I was getting to connect with her, and it was well worth the early wake up. Now, my production team for the podcast is laughably small. My production team is me, primarily, and a very occasional video and audio editor who can salvage tape for me when there is too much of an echo. This interview is clear and crisp 95% of the time, but there is a little bit of a delay or lag that results in me talking over Dr. Nerina from time to time. Maybe it was just my excitement in asking her questions and talking through some of the ideas that she's sharing. Maybe I'm blaming the tech, but there's also occasionally a slight echo. So it wasn't enough to put it through my robust production team. It doesn't take away from what you can get out of this episode. So I encourage you to have a listen. Enjoy. Welcome to the Baby Sleep Connection, a podcast that explores baby sleep and more through the lens of attachment and development. I'm your host, Heather Boyd. I'm a mom of 3, an occupational therapist, and a certified infant and family sleep specialist. If you are a tired parent who wants to support your baby's sleep holistically, keep listening as we delve into approaches that go well beyond the usual strategies of wake windows and bedtime routines. Your baby's sleep is connected with so much more. Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Baby Sleep Connection podcast. I'm your host, Heather Boyd, and I'm excited to have a special guest on today. It is Dr. Nerina Ramlakhan. Dr. Ramlakhan is a physiologist and sleep therapist with over 30 years experience helping people and organizations thrive with wellness and with sleep by combining her background in physiology, psychology, Western medicine, and Eastern philosophy, as well as her personal insights to create shifts in awareness and consciousness. And we're going to make the link to sleep over the next hour. Her work is always practical, and she is also well known for sharing small things that make a big difference. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Ramlakhan.
Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you for your spot-on introduction of me. And that was great. Thank you. And it's an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to you today, to chat to you.
Wonderful. Well, I know that a lot of the tired parents listening to my podcast are going to want to know about sleep, but I am going to start at the very root of this. And my clients are going to recognize this connection in the way that I work with clients. But I would love you to start with telling me, what is the science of safety or safety science?
Yeah. You're right. This is the root of how we sleep. I love that you've expressed it in that way. So safety science is the science of how the nervous system works, the autonomic nervous system. And as hunter-gatherers, urban hunter-gatherers, our autonomic nervous system throughout our evolution has been designed along the premise of, are we safe or not safe? Are we in a survival situation? Or are we in an environment dealing with situations in which we can thrive? There's an adequate supply of food. We have shelter. We're not running from saber-toothed tigers or predators, but we're in a situation that is conducive to us thriving. So our nervous system throughout the history of our evolution has actually cleverly designed. Our physiology has been very cleverly designed with this premise: are we safe or are we not safe? So at one stage, very early in the evolution of human beings, our world was so unsafe that it would have been in the interest of our survival to become very numb and to freeze. And so our nervous system, the first level of development or first stage of development of our nervous system is focused on giving us this ability to freeze or to shut down in the face of threat. So that's the first part of the nervous system, the dorsal vagus nervous system, the branch of the autonomic and the vagus nerve. And then as we evolved and became more resourceful, our physiology responded in kind, and we evolved with the sympathetic nervous system, which enables us to fight or flee, to amass energy. So as we become better at feeding ourselves and having more energy and becoming more intelligent and the brain developing more, we develop this resource to fight or flee. So we have the fight or flight sympathetic nervous system, which is the other branch of the autonomic nervous system. And then as we continue in our evolutionary hierarchy, if you like, or the pathway of evolution, safety, then we develop weapons, build shelters, we become more canny about catching our food and protecting ourselves from predators. Safety becomes an option, and we evolve with the ventral vagus. So we have dorsal sympathetic nervous system, ventral vagus. And this physiology, so I am a physiologist, but little did I know that back in the 90s when I was supposedly and sitting in lectures, but probably not a lot of the time because I was probably hanging out in my hall of residence with hangovers. But at about that time, roughly the same time, there was a scientist called Dr. Stephen Porges who was developing the theory, polyvagal theory. Poly meaning many, vagal as in the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is the nerve that wanders. In fact, vagus translates to the wanderer. The vagus nerve travels through the body from the brain, down through the spinal column, out through into the tissues and muscles and limbs, innervating all of those areas of the body and enabling us to function optimally, physiologically, and respond to the environment we need to. So this is safety science, if you like, in its essence. It's the ability of the nervous system to respond to the environment, to gauge whether it is safe or unsafe, and to react neurologically in an appropriate way according to our environment. That's the kind of summary, if that makes sense, of what
Yes,
safety
yes.
science.
Well, and the people that have been following me or working with me for a while know that the vagus nerve comes up in our conversation. In fact, I often give them some strategies to kind of support that vagus nerve. I wonder if you have any tips for parents, and we will get to the sleep part, but because this is such a foundation, we start with this idea of trying to keep our babies safe, but we forget that we need to feel safe too. How can
Absolutely.
parents come to the parenting table or to the bedtime feeling more regulated themselves through this lens of polyvagal theory?
Yeah. Oh, Heather, I love that question. So I believe that as parents, as human beings, we are constantly lending our nervous systems to the people around us. And you and I are co-regulating with each other. So that means your nervous system is interacting with my nervous system. And I am looking at you and I'm feeling safe. I can see that you're smiling. And even though we're thousands of miles away and we have this electronic medium through which we communicate, my very clever physiology is reading that this is a situation in which I feel safe. I'm reading your facial expressions. I'm listening to your vocal prosody, the undulations in your voice, and it's feeding back to my nervous system that I'm safe. And so that in turn impacts on how I'm able to deliver with you. Now, if you were a hostile interviewer, I would probably start to stammer, go back to my default stammering and go back to a very, very young version of myself in which my nervous system hasn't had this much work done on it. And so it's quite anxious and it responds in that way. But because I feel safe with you, I'm able to respond, and we're co-regulating in a very harmonious manner. Now, can you imagine? We don't really know each other. We've only known each other 10 minutes, if that, electronically, virtually, much less a baby that has been created from the physiology and the biology of two human beings and carried in the mother's belly for 9 months. So its nervous system is so sensitively attuned to the nervous system of its primary carer, usually mother, and then the father. So it's going to pick up any fluctuations because it's so sensitive. And this being wants to survive. It wants to survive. So as soon as it comes into the planet, it opens its mouth and goes, what has happened? And the mother responds, and the physiology of the mother responds with the oxytocin response reflex to immediately move to making the baby feel safe. I don't think I've ever expressed it in this way before. It makes me feel quite emotional as a mother of a 20-year-old. But from the moment of a baby's birth, from the moment of that child's birth, it is seeking safety. And when it first comes into the world, because its nervous system is so young and underdeveloped, and there isn't enough myelin, so it depends on its parents to create safety for it, so that the need for the parents to lend their nervous systems even more becomes even greater. In other words, they have a great responsibility to steady themselves. Now, the challenge for new parents, and one of my team, this lovely guy, Rich, who's just had a baby, well, his wife, Kim, just had a baby a week and a half ago. He sent me a message last week saying, it's been so stressful because we have this app that says, do this, do that, do this, do that. And we've had to put it away and go into our intuition. Now, our intuition is beautifully designed to listen. So the mother, while carrying her baby, developing baby, her physiology is changing because the cells from that fetus can travel across the placenta in the circulation, can cross the blood-brain barrier. So mother's brain is changing while fetus's physiology, baby's physiology is developing. So they are starting to develop a method and a mode of communication in their cells, in their biology, and in their physiology and nervous systems, which becomes stronger and stronger as the baby develops. And that connection is still there when the baby is born. And how do parents then respond in a practical way with this? My advice to parents today is to get better at listening, is to listen. Listen to what? Don't listen out there to start with. Start your day listening in. If you don't know how to do that, then simply do this. Get this thing, this device, put it away. Don't be constantly looking at it. Don't look at it first thing in the morning. This is so practical. It's so simple. Start your day listening in. So you wake up in the morning, if you've been able to get some sleep. You put your hand over your heart, left hand over your heart. You put your right hand on your belly and you listen. My nervous system is really dysregulated right now. Because becoming a parent is so scary, isn't it? Still scares me. My baby's 20 years old. So we have to develop and hone our ability to listen. And the more you develop it, the more you listen to your breathing. You listen to your thoughts. You listen to the speed of your thoughts. You listen to what your words are saying to you. And they might be saying, you're such a bad parent. You're such a bad mother. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. You're not doing this right. You're not doing, okay. That's what's going on. That equals dysregulation. Okay, how do I calm that inner voice? Let me just breathe into my belly. Let me remember what Heather's told me about breathing. Can I just engage the belly? Can I engage my vagus? Can I do something like a breathe in for 4 through my nose, breathe out for 6 with my mouth making a slight whistling sound? So simple, Heather. So powerful. Starts to bring the nervous system into balance.
It's so simple, except that when you describe that, the busy thoughts and getting into your body. And I think of the parents who are so external because that's
Yeah,
how we've managed through much of our lives is thinking, fixing, and problem solving, that we're not even in our bodies anymore. We're
yeah,
all in our heads. And yet here we have this little baby who is expecting things to be like they were millennia ago, like the conditions around them. And yet we're busy and we're stressed and we're getting all of this information externally that I feel like so often our instincts that are there, they're just buried. They're buried under so
yeah,
much thinking and busyness.
yeah. And if we could just rest in our bodies. Safety is not, we cannot think ourselves into safety. Safety is somatic. Safety is of the body. To feel safe, you need to be in your body. What do I mean by that? I need to feel my feet on the ground right now. I have a million things I want to say to you, but let me just lend you and your listeners my nervous system throughout this interview so that as you listen, I am imparting. I'm a scientist, I'm a neuroscientist, but I'm also a healer. So while you listen to me, I want to mirror something to you that will help to bring safety into your body. Feel your feet on the ground as you listen to me. I am feeling my butt on the chair. I am feeling my belly engaging as I breathe. I'm even putting my hand on my belly right now and just giving it a little rub, which feels great. I'm feeling my belly move as I breathe. I'm feeling my shoulders relaxing down. I'm feeling a wave of rest and relaxation coming into my body. Even while I'm speaking to you, I feel restful and rested. This is restoring me. I'm doing what I love doing. And even while I am working, inverted commas, I can hold my body in a state of safety.
It reminds me of so much of what I tell parents when they're trying to get their baby to sleep and the
Yeah,
baby's not falling asleep. And I ask the parents to pay attention to how close are their shoulders to their ears, because so often the desire to get babies to fall asleep means that a parent's body is so tight, but they're all externally focused on the problem instead of being in their
oh,
body.
gosh, I wish you'd been around when I had mine,
I'll
my
admit,
little
I wish
girl.
I'd been around when I had mine too. I had no idea what I
Yeah,
was doing.
yeah. And so, I feel like I'm a village elder sometimes, and I just wish I was there when I was growing up because it was so hard. And I wish
Mm-hmm.
you were there when my daughter was born because it was so hard. And I couldn't breastfeed, and my milk dried up, and because I was terrified, I felt so unsafe. And I had my daughter straight on the back of a traumatic bereavement in my family, in my immediate family. The person I loved most in the world, my sister, had died traumatically, and my daughter was born on the anniversary of her death. And I was carrying so much grief. And so I resorted to being the triathlete marathon runner. And within 3 weeks, I was back out there running again. And I was breaking my body down because I was so scared of what was happening. And if someone had just said, if I had just listened to my mother, actually, who said, give me the baby and go and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Give me Maya, go sleep. I'm going to make chicken soup for you. Go and rest. And I was like, oh, how dare you? You know what to do because I've got 600 books and I've got all this equipment, you know.
Yeah.
But motherhood is an ancient wisdom that's contained in all of ourselves.
And we don't listen or have had practice listening to that ancient wisdom. Gosh,
Mm.
that is, well, and what is tied up in the birth process, even, and what we're carrying into it, that comes into the motherhood piece of it too, with, with trauma and with the experiences that you had.
Yeah.
And so many mothers that I'm working with now and families who have collectively gone through the trauma of the pandemic, gone through the trauma of not having community in the same way that we would have had even back in the 80s. It certainly changes the dynamic of it. When I think about parents with this external drive to look for the answers outside instead of inside, and you mentioned apps, and I know for some of my families, the apps are almost mystically accurate, but for many, for the majority, it causes more anxiety and worry because they're looking for the answer from a piece of technology that does not inherently know their baby as well as they do, even if they feel so uncertain. And they certainly doesn't have the wisdom that they have.
Yes. Yeah. And technology, hey, friend or foe. And I'm wearing an Aura ring. Right, I've had it 4 years. It's coming to the end of its life. I love this Aura ring. I was gifted this from a client, kicking and screaming because I was very anti-measurement. I was very, I started doing this work 28 years ago, and I was all over this thing of orthosomnia, poor sleep that arises from the over measurement of sleep and the worry about what the data is telling you. And I've had to evolve with the times, so the dinosaurs being dragged into the 21st century, kicking and screaming. But when I had my daughter, there weren't apps and things like that, but thankfully, actually, because I probably, knowing my personality, which is a perfectionistic overthinker, who's very hard on herself, I probably would have gone over the top with it. Now, apps, friend or foe, technology, friend or foe. It's about listening again. Listen, listen, because you do not know your baby. You are the journey of motherhood and parenthood is a constant renewing journey of getting to know this human being. I am still learning about my daughter at the age 20, turned 20 last week. I'm still learning who she is. Oh, and when she was a baby, swaddling, absolutely not. Now that I know my daughter, it's the opposite thing, you know? Wake her up to feed her? Absolutely not. My daughter takes her time. This is where I love things like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine and a holistic approach because, she is so watery. My daughter transitions into everything so slowly. You know,
Tell me a
she
little
doesn't move
more
with.
about that because a lot of people won't know, the Ayurvedic breakdown or
Yeah,
the traditional
yeah,
Chinese
yeah.
medicine approach, which can be another layer to understanding from an intuitive place what is going on in the nervous system. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not a practitioner of Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine. I've read a bit of it, and all of my books incorporate a little bit of that. And if I can shamelessly just recommend one of them, The Little Book of Sleep for Parents is a really good one. This is my third book. Finding Inner Safety is the fourth one. But this one, because it's little, and there's some Ayurveda in there, the Indian science, which talks about the doshas, Vata, which is air, Pitta, which is fire, Kapha, which is water. But it also talks about traditional Chinese medicine, which talks about 5 elements of wood and air. And so there is a similarity, but it's just looking at things from a slightly different perspective. You don't have to become a practitioner. Please don't overwhelm yourself by going and doing a diploma in Chinese medicine, or it's so complex that, so when you're a new parent, that's the last thing that you need. What I want you to take away from this is just slow down and observe your baby. Observe your baby. Notice that your baby doesn't want to be woken up suddenly. No, or it may do. Maybe your baby springs awake and wants attention. My one was a slow transitioner. Why? Because she has a lot of kapha or water energy. Water can move quite slowly once it settles down. Can take a while to get moving. And then if you look at the Ayurveda, she has that pale skin. She has very white nails. She has these the whites of her eye are very. She looks like the watery type. She's can be sluggish, whereas I'm the fiery pitta, gets moving very quickly. Wants to go move from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And as a baby, I was incredibly restless. Whereas my daughter needed her sleep, needs sleep. Once she's fallen asleep, really needed her sleep. I don't know if that's helpful. It keeps
Yes.
coming.
Well, Yeah, absolutely. And the book you mentioned, it is such a sweet little concise book that I
Thank
read it
you.
in a day, not even a day. I think it was an hour and a
Mhm.
half. I want to lend it to my 14-year-old because he's at an age where he does not listen to parents as
Yeah.
much. He needs something other than parental advice coming. And I do think one thing that comes out for me there is you have some beautiful and very simple exercises in there for regulating the
Yeah.
nervous system and supporting sleep.
Yeah.
But what comes up for me over and over again with the parents I work with my own life, these simple exercises, whether they're from that book or from some other piece of advice that people get, you have to do them for them to
Yeah.
work. You have to do
Yes.
them. And that can be a barrier when you're in your head. So for those listening that are intrigued and want to try something, just pick one thing to try in this
Yeah.
moment. Even on this podcast, just this episode, you've already described putting your left hand on your heart and your right hand on your belly and taking deep breaths. I always tell parents they have the one thing they always have, even if they don't have the app, they don't have the swaddle, they don't have the noise machine, they always have their breath. And that breath can
Absolutely.
be the foundation.
And the breath is so beautiful. The breath is so, it's not even, I would even say, maybe lose the idea of it needs to be a deep breath. What I would love is if you can, before you pick your baby up, just observe your breathing first. Notice it, observe it, and see if you can gently prolong the exhalation. So you breathe in, and maybe you do it on a count of four. One, two, three, four. And then you're going to breathe out on six, but you purse your lips and you make a slight hissing sound as you breathe out. So it's a kind of, so I did take a little breath in between that because
Yeah.
I was
Well, and
talking
I
just as I
think
went into it.
even
Breathing.
my breathing is slowing down just watching you breathe.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
co-regulation,
So,
it's everywhere.
and it's everywhere. I'm lending my nervous system to you, you're lending to me. And you just do that for a few breaths, three exhales, easy, long. Now you could take it into going to breathe out through my hips, through my legs, through my feet. Now you see how I've become very melodic. It's because I sing. But when you pick your baby up, if you're feeling really dysregulated, you hold the baby to you and you hum.
And you naturally rock too. It's something I still do when I see a mom holding a baby. It's I rock.
Yeah, and the hum sound is so healing. You could even as a whisper, and that will start to regulate your breathing. That will start to bring that heart coherence into the interaction, the vibration, the energy flow between you and your baby. Start to co-regulate. See? So
It's lovely. Yeah, so simple. Yet
simple.
there are those psychological overthinking barriers, I would say, that just
Mm,
do it. Do the breath, start there. I
yeah.
also I find for parents when they are very focused, as many of us are, I was with my own kids, on the sleep piece and making it better and everything being about the baby, and the baby is not sleeping or not falling asleep. And I always say to parents, start with yourself as you're
Yeah.
advising today, that breath, that regulated nervous system. And so often, because we're so focused on our baby, we think focusing on ourselves is like that's for later or not worth our
Yeah.
time. The problem is that the baby is not sleeping. And I always say to parents, if you can't focus on you for you, like for your own wellness, focus on you for your baby because it will pay forward. That regulation will happen.
Mm, it will. And, it's simple. We've heard it so many times, this cliche, becomes cliched. You're on an aeroplane. You're listening to the emergency instructions. What do they say? In the event of an emergency, put your oxygen mask on first. There we go. That encapsulates the essence, the core of safety science. It takes a microsecond to go, oh, notice my breathing. Okay, then a few seconds to observe it a little bit more, a few more seconds to deepen into it. You're walking to your baby's cot, you walk into the baby's room, you're reaching to pick the baby. You're in here before you're out, inside out. And I know that the instinct is to reach for baby and to think about baby because that's for the survival of the species, you know. But you know, in between those moments where your baby's resting or sleeping, you rest. When baby's sleeping, just take a few minutes. And I know that there's often, you know, for parents, new parents, particularly, this kind of multitasking chaos that takes place where, okay, I'm going to go do the washing and I'm going to do the bottles and I'm going to do the this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to go prepare the food. And oh, take 3 to 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes. Lie on the floor, put a pillow or a cushion under your head. Bring your knees up, feet on the ground, knees up. Both, one hand over, left hand over heart, right hand on belly. And breathe for 3 to 5 minutes. Use that time to rest in your body. If you're a new parent, I'm going to be doing a session like this with Rich and Kim later this week as a gift for them. And I'm going to teach them some of these. I'm going to talk to them about some of these techniques. Because, you know, as a new parent, you can know all this stuff, but it all goes out the window. But one of the things I say to young parents is maybe just you stop using the word sleep so much, especially for yourself. I'm just going to rest. I'm going
Mm.
to rest. Don't be looking at your data in the morning. How many hours of sleep did I get or not get? You know, just abolish the word sleep.
I
And
love
in
that
fact,
idea.
if people join me on LinkedIn, I did a post on this last week where I talk about the importance of napping and how well built we are for napping. And I talked about a trip that I did to Hong Kong and back in 3 days, 72-hour trip, and that I didn't use the word sleep. I just napped. I had several naps during that trip. And I talked about Ellen MacArthur, the sailor who won the Vendée Globe sailing. She sailed solo in 2002. The race took 72 days. She had 385 naps in 72 days. Her longest period of sleep was 36 minutes. Human beings are effing amazing.
It really is. That's
We are
incredible.
so amazing. We are so resilient. We are so resourceful, but we don't believe it. And we think, oh, I must get my 8 hours now. What's going to happen? Duh. You know, so ditch the notion of sleep for a bit. Rest.
I love that focus on the rest piece, especially since parents are getting a lot of interrupted sleep. I'll use the word
Yeah.
sleep. I'm curious because what comes up for me is something that I'd heard before listening to you, and it came up again when I was reading your book. This idea of traditionally or in history or evolutionary bimodal sleep. This idea that we, from a evolutionary point of view, have
Hmm.
interrupted sleep. I wonder if you can speak to that because I think a lot of what you're saying is about reducing the anxiety and worry that we have about sleep because then it
Yes.
interferes with sleep even more. So what does that look like in terms of the history of human sleep and why it looks that way?
So, in evolutionary terms, as hunter gatherers, it would have been insane if we'd been designed with a physiology that said you need to retire to your cave and your mat of leaves, pass out for 8 hours. So, first of all, we've evolved to wake several times during the night. Often we don't realize because it's a level of consciousness where you don't even realize that you've woken up, you've checked the caves is safe, and you go back to sleep, right? You don't even know that's happening. So, that's the first thing. So we wake up during the night. Ain't a problem. Stop worrying about waking up during the night. Stop looking at your device that says you woke up so many times and you're worrying about it. It's not a problem. It's normal. Yay, you're normal. Second, we then evolved with this bimodal or biphasic pattern of sleep, where as the light levels started to change, and the sun started to almost before the sun started to rise, our circadian timer, and this is where if you go into things like traditional Chinese medicine and the science of the traditional Chinese medicine clock, we are designed in our physiology to become a little bit more alert between 2 and 4 a.m. Now, in our modern day, what people do is they go, oh, I keep waking between 2 and 4, and they go on their phone and they go, oh, there you go. It's 2:30 in the morning. Then they start worrying, and then they worry about their problems. Then they go on the dating app, or they look at, what Donald Trump's doing, or they look at whatever, you know? So we've become a little bit stupid as hunter-gatherers, urban hunter-gatherers, because we're kind of messing up. Now, in the old days, probably what the hunter-gatherer would have done, caveman, cavewoman, is gone hunting. This is a good time. The sun hasn't come up yet, light levels, but our senses are quite alert because our circadian rhythm is designed to make us more resourceful. So we're designed to wake up in the early hours. Now, for us modern urban hunter-gatherers, we have the luxury of the 10 supermarkets in our vicinity within a 5-mile radius. So we don't need to wait between 2 and 4 and go shopping. So we have the luxury of we can go back to sleep again. But it is built into our physiology innately that if we wanted to, we could capitalize on that little upsurge in physiological cognitive capability that would make us resourceful if we wanted to go and catch food, right? But we don't need to use it. So we can go back to sleep. So we worry about that. Now, actually, we're more than bimodal or biphasic. We're actually polyphasic, as evidenced by our napping capability.
Right, with our ability to sleep for short periods of time and then have another cycle of sleep later,
Yeah.
a few hours
So
later.
I bought several books on sleep, baby sleep, when I was a new mother, because I'm a perfectionistic overthinker.
As
Who
are
had
almost
traumatic
every
childhood.
client and me.
Who've had traumatic childhoods. We want to be a star in our parenting, don't we? You want to parent from the exact opposite of our own childhood. So we buy the books, we do all the things, and then it was just like, you know what, one after the other, I was throwing them out into the charity box. I kept one which kind of followed a physiological rhythm, this oscillation, the ultradian rhythm, which is the hum of your energy within the 24-hour cycle. It's called the ultradian cycle. So I followed this acronym, EASY, it was called: eat, activity, sleep. U time. Baby eats. Baby has activity. Then baby wants to sleep. And then you have U time, oxygen mask. U time. Mm-hmm. So I would roughly follow this. Okay, Maya's going to eat something. We're going to play for a bit. And then I can see she's getting sleepy. She's going to sleep for a bit. And this is when multitasking chaos would kick in, and
what do I do in this time? There's 100 things, and then you end up spinning yourself into circles, and then baby wakes up.
But ideally you would take some time to become regulated.
Well, even if you are going, and to not dismiss that as not being just as valuable as doing the dishes. I mean, maybe the dishes will make a difference, and if you do the dishes, great, but don't dismiss the value of sitting cross-legged on the floor or laying back and resting and paying attention to your breath.
And those are the gold star restoration breaks. I mean, what if doing the dishes could be a beautiful self-regulation, meditative, somatic experience?
Some people laugh when I call it meditative, but I do find dishes meditative.
Yeah. And Buddhist teachers will teach you that, when you're doing the dishes, do the dishes. Do the dishes. That means I'm washing, I'm drying, I'm packing, I'm feeling my feet, I'm breathing. Maybe I'm humming, maybe I'm dancing, but that becomes an opportunity to regulate. So when baby is up again, you move to the next stage of the cycle. But yeah.
Well, and you're reminding me that when I was listening to a previous interview you had given, I happened to be doing up my shoelace, and I don't think I've ever been that present doing up my shoelace before. But instead of thinking of the 10 next things I would do, I simply focused on paying attention to doing up my shoelace. It's so simple. It's so regulating and gets us in our bodies.
I know, I'm constantly learning this myself, Heather, because having once done a lot of extreme sport, the marathons and the triathlons and all this sort of thing. And then I got my dog during the pandemic, and she's sitting here beside me, and she's my greatest teacher and healer. But I became so impatient about dog walking because it was like, oh, I hate this dog walking thing. I have to do that. And then I can go to the gym. And then, and I'm starting to realize that actually it's meditation, the dog walking and the noticing and the restoration that this can give me, as opposed to just do this thing, then I can do this. And it can be such a restorative practice
Mm.
if I choose to be present with what it is, you know.
I
Mm.
would love to ask you about this idea of everything that we do is either through fear or love. Because I think
Mm.
so often with the go, 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 if we really slow down and broke it down, we're worried about our babies growing up and being healthy. We worry about whether they're
Mm.
developing okay or eating okay, or we worry about whether what our return to work at the end of mat leave. Which, by the way, when you talk about that presence of, I'm sidetracking here a bit, but that presence to just rest and not be stressed about the the waking up in the middle of the night if you're awake from 2 to 4. There is a privilege in having longer maternity leaves in Canada, and I think the UK has a pretty sizable maternity leave to take advantage, not to do more during the day, but to understand that you can rest more at night. But when we go back to this idea of fear versus love, I think it can help reframe how we're even approaching the problems that we're trying to solve or the things that we're trying to do. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll try to, because it's such a huge topic in itself. And I think it came from Kubler-Ross's work. She talked about stages of grief or every emotion. If you look at it in its essence, you think about all your emotions, everything simmers down to either coming from a place of fear, survival, sympathetic nervous system, or dorsal vagus, shut down, protect, survive, or love. I'm in safety. All is well. There is food. My young are protected. I am sheltered. All is well. I'm safe. Fear or love, two places, polar opposites. And I'm trying to think of the most practical because I love being practical, but I'm also spiritual and philosophical and physiological and all of these things.
Mm.
Again, coming back to this point of listening deeply, and you wake up first thing in the morning. I'm going to be honest, I woke up with you this morning and I was in fear. No particular reason, but I was in a fear state. I just woke up in that. And maybe it's a throwback to Mondays, the pop group that sang I Don't Like Mondays. Can't
Yes,
remember
yeah.
which one. So there's this bubbling up of fear. And this morning I need to meditate. I want to meditate. So I sat and I meditated, and I have the luxury of being able to go back to my TM practice now because my daughter's grown up and also, so, but even a 1 minute meditation, a 30-second meditation. Oh, that's interesting. Listen to the speed of your thoughts. Listen to the quality. Is there a lot of I have to, I must do, I should do, I have to do, I have to do, I must do, I must do. I call that masturbation, by the way. Yeah, I know people will remember that. It's not me who coined that. It's
Uh,
a psychologist who called it masturbation. What did she just say? Masturbation. Must do, must do. Gripping. I'm afraid. I can't survive. Okay, so you notice that you wake up in a state of masturbation. There's some work to do. Notice some breaths. Drop into the belly. Can you encourage that breath to come into the belly? Can you ooh, ah, ooh. I mean, there's all sorts of techniques that you can use to engage the vagus nerve, the ventral vagus. Sound is great. Humming is great. And it need be as simple. It doesn't have to be complicated to get you into a state of, now you might not then go, oh, I love my life, but you are moving closer to a state of safety, which has love at its core. When you're operating from a place of fear, this is when you're in dysregulation. And this is when these little beings, nervous systems, antennae, whoa, they are the most sophisticated antennae going. They're going to feel it. They pick it up.
Yeah, I often call babies little barometers that
There
they
you
have their
go.
own feelings and sensations and everything going on, but they also are an absolute barometer of the primary caregiver's nervous system too. You get instant feedback, especially for
Yeah,
highly sensitive kiddos, which I tend to work with quite a
yeah,
lot. They're so sensitive
yes.
that you do not have to guess. Even if you are not paying attention to your own body, it's going to be right in front of you and your baby's regulation.
Mm, wonderful work you're doing. It's something amazing because, my daughter is so sensitive, and I have had to learn so much about her sensitivity, but not from the point of view of protect her, but how do I help her to myelinate?
Mm,
How do I help her nervous system to get stronger?
mm.
Because I overprotected.
Well, and
I
it's
overprotected.
hard not to because we
Yeah.
look at our role as being so tied with making sure our kids are okay. And we don't need to push them into managing this all on their own. It's little by little, right? And so often
Little
with
by
parents,
little.
I tell them all these strategies. Like, yes, there are some that are very specific to the age of a baby and their sleep development. But everything you've brought
Mhm.
up today is useful now as babies are very young, but also they they can be used over and they continue to be useful for
They
the
continue.
entire growing up
Yeah.
period or parenting role that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. So that when they become old enough to start self-regulating, it becomes a journey of handing responsibility back to them. And that's where you go into the next level of challenge, right? Because when they're entirely regular through your nervous system, uh, you've got to keep working on you. And then they go into toddlerhood and they start rebelling because their nervous system is starting to want to explore and behave in a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully. And then they go into teenagerhood. And then you get the rebellion of a nervous system that's raging, and the reptilian nervous system that's going, behave badly, don't want to listen to the tribe of parents anymore. I want to find my own tribe, hanging out on the corner, the TikToks, whatever. And it's challenging as hell,
Mm-hmm.
particularly, as you go into the Gen Alphas, Gen Zs, and social media. And
Yes,
that's a
that's a
whole
whole
other
well,
ball
and we're
game.
at that teenager stage right now, and it's fascinating to me to make the parallels between toddlerhood and teenagehood, just in terms of that drive to be separate and that
Yes.
drive to be on their own, and that the constant learning. I think parents are feeling so early in their parenting career that I don't know whether it's helpful or not for them to know that I am still learning, that you're still learning with your 20-year-old. It
Yeah,
really is an adaptability exercise. And I know
it
we're
is.
veering a little bit away from sleep in the nervous system, but when we have this idea of what it should look like or should feel like, or how much in control we should be, that all goes out the window if we settle into understanding that there is development happening, not just with our kids over years and years and years, but ourselves as well.
Completely, totally agree. And that adaptability and that agility to keep noticing that they are who they are. They are human beings. They are their own souls, and their souls have a journey that isn't completely tied up with yours. And that enmeshment, entanglement that we can get into of thinking it has to be a certain way when they have their own journeys. And they're allowed to really mess it up.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
allowed to make mistakes. They're little saplings, They're not fully grown trees, so you can't see those fruits yet.
Yeah.
They're just growing. They're growing. And yeah, it's parenting is one of the hardest jobs, but also one of the most rewarding, isn't
It
it?
is. And that just like the oxygen mask, we hear that so often, and yet it is such a foundational truth. I wonder if, as I'm thinking about the parents who, we're working on watching baby sleep unfold, it's a developmental process. There's so much happening in the nervous system and the brain that allows sleep to even begin to look similar to what an adult sleep would look like. But
Mm.
often by the time babies are sleeping, I won't say better because it's not like they're sleeping poorly. They're sleeping the way that babies ought to be sleeping. But when that sleep gets to be longer stretches and more predictable, and those stretches start getting longer and longer into the night, parents often find themselves facing this insomnia that they never experienced before. These long wake ups, perhaps related to the physiology of sleep and evolution, perhaps because they're carrying so much worry around in the middle of the night. So maybe a
Yeah.
combination of the two. What are some practical strategies for supporting a parent at that point that finally they can sleep? Like it's available to them, but they can't get back into sleep in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Okay. Can I? Because I developed so many tools and resources, and I have a methodology which comes from the 28 years of doing this work. Somebody told me the other day, you always say 25 years, over 25 years. How many years exactly? Okay, it's 28. Okay, so I'll start using 28. 28 years of doing this work, including, 10 years in a psychiatric clinic, women recovering from cancer, professional athletes, corporate employees, breadth of knowledge. I've created a methodology. I've noticed that there are 5 things that can really reset the nervous system. So it would be great if you could direct people in the show notes to my website, because there is a very inexpensive course. We're talking just double numbers, 30 odd pounds or something, on my website, which encapsulates this methodology, the 5 things that you can do to reset your nervous system. And within 10 to 14 days, these 5 things, which will help you to get to sleep more easily, help you fall asleep, stay asleep for longer, but it'll help you to get back to sleep if you wake up during the night because your nervous system is more regulated. These I call my 5 non-negotiables. They'll also help your energy levels. Number 1, eat breakfast within 30 minutes of rising. Make sure you're eating a nutrient-rich breakfast in the mornings. Number 2, don't use caffeine as a substitute for food. I love this cup of coffee that I have, but it has to be after my nutrient-rich breakfast, with protein, fat, carbohydrate. Don't use caffeine as a substitute for food. Ideally, no more than 1 a day, I would say. If you're struggling with your sleep, try and get rid of the caffeine until your sleep is normalizing. Number 3, hydrate. And I have some electrolytes in my water at the moment. Aiming to drink about 2 liters of at least water a day. Today, I'm going to aim for 3 because we've got a mini heat wave in the UK. Yay! Number 4, if you can get to bed earlier, in bed around 9:30, 10ish. It's boring as hell, yes. But that sleep before midnight, if you look at it from traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, it sets you up optimally to slide. It's like a surfer surfing a wave, catching a wave. They're not going to catch the wave in the middle of the wave. They're going to catch it at a certain point, a sweet spot, so that they can hit the amplitude, maximal amplitude of that wave that they want to surf. It's the same with sleep. That happens, that sweet spot is before midnight, around 9:30, between 9 and 10. You don't have to be in bed sleeping, but you're resting. And number 5, please, please, please cultivate a healthier relationship with your phone, with your devices. In other words, get them out your room.
Mm.
And they go, how will I know the time? Get a clock, an old-fashioned digital clock. I have to press down on it to see the time. I take it on business trips with me. It's tiny. They still make clocks. You
They
can get them on
do.
Amazon. And you don't look at it. Don't when you wake up during the night, having listened to this interview, don't worry about waking up. Know that it's normal and don't look at the time. You look at the time, it accelerates you up into a state of consciousness from which it is harder to get back down into sleep again. Don't look at the time. Use your breathing to put yourself to sleep, or follow me on Instagram, social media, where I've got all sorts of meditations to help you to get back to sleep if you wake during the night. If you check out the one, there's one called a restorative meditation. There's another one called there's finding inner safety meditation. But also, if people access the course, there's a free meditation which you can teach yourself in 5 minutes. It's so easy.
Well, and I'll be sure to
Pretty
add
simple.
it to the show notes. But one thing that I recall with that, because often I'll recommend to parents that they use a hypnosis soundtrack for sleep or tapping. But all of those things tend to require a device near you. So when I heard you say in another interview, make this so simple that you don't even
Mhm.
need the phone to do it. Like even if you were leading a yoga nidra, I think that's how it's called, a meditative phrases that help you get to sleep, to make it so easy that you don't need the device or don't need it for long. You can learn it and then feel confident doing it without the device in the room is such a important piece to taking that tech out of the room because you want to use it. But if you can find a way not to use it in the room, that's even better.
I used mine yesterday. I used my own technique because I woke up with some worries about my elderly parent, and I used it to put myself back to sleep. And it took me less than 60 seconds. I don't remember using much of it at all. And it's so simple. And you do not need a device because the thing is, if you're using an app, you have to get up, you have to find the app. You need
Mm-hmm.
that you've got exposure to the light.
Mm-hmm.
Even if your phone is adjusted with light, you associate the minute you I pick this up, I've associated it with being leaned into life. So this level of consciousness is I'm more agitated.
Mm.
I'm more hurt, you know?
It's reminding me of that association. It reminds me of a magazine I used to read when my eldest was just a wee little baby, and it was Mothering Magazine, and I had a hard copy of it. But magazines have often switched to electronic, and when that magazine switched to electronic, I grieved because I did not want to be on a device while nursing
Yes.
him or while helping him to sleep. So the value of finding those alternatives that don't include that. And I think the strategy you're actually talking about is the one about starting with your big toe and working your
Yeah,
way
yeah.
up. It's absolutely
Shall I do
lovely.
it is. Shall I do 15 seconds of it?
Beautiful. That would be lovely. That'd be lovely because I did it last night actually for the first time, and I don't recall how far I got into it, but it wasn't very.
Yeah.
I had cocoa a little too late in the evening last night, so I used it and I did not get very far. So yes, please lead us in that. That would be beautiful.
So imagine you're in bed and you're either having difficulty getting to sleep or getting back to sleep. So you close your eyes, and I'm going to talk you through just a few seconds of this meditation. But whatever I say, I want you to repeat it to yourself silently and softly, as if you're putting a baby to sleep. Okay, so you speak to yourself, and it's a bit silly, but this is how it goes. I love my left foot. I love my left big toe. I love my left little toe. I love all the toes of my left foot. I love my entire left foot. I love my left ankle. Okay, if you open your eyes now, that's the basis of it. I would have gone to my left lower leg, my left shin, my left calf, my left knee. Sometimes I'm really detailed on my left knee because I'm healing it from a slight injury, and I might even go into the fluid between the kneecap, the patella tendon, the iliotibial band, the vastus medius, whatever. It depends on how alert and awake I am. But generally, these days, I don't get past. I love my left big toe. And then if you wake up and you go, doing that thing, if you fall asleep rather, that's great. But sometimes the mind goes, oh, you just fell asleep. Wake up. You wake up and go, oh, what happened? Start again. I love my left big toe. You go back to the
Back
starting
to the
point. If you start
beginning.
on your right foot, you start on the right big toe. It's
Right.
as simple as that. You end up at the top. Now, in the course, I do the whole thing where you go all the way up the left side, you end up at the top of the head, you go down the right side, you end up at the right big toe.
Well,
It's
and
it's so
even
simple.
even in that 20 seconds, I think I was definitely in a zone. I was in a zone. I'm curious, and I know our time is close to the end, but I'm glad you talked about the coffee piece. I know it's linked to adenosine too, the adenosine receptors first thing in the morning. When we fill those receptors with caffeine, instead of pausing for a few hours, we don't get to a certain level of alertness without those receptors. There's some physiology there. So I'm glad you talked about the coffee piece. Night owls versus larks. Are we kidding ourselves when we all think that we are natural night hawks because we don't fall asleep early?
Yes, largely. Yes and no. Small percentage of people are genuine owls, and a small percentage of people are genuine larks. There's a normal distribution. One end of the scale, you got the people who want to go to bed and wake up late. You got the people who like to go to bed early and wake up early. But society, technology, light levels, urban light levels, blue light, Netflix, catch up TV box sets have all imposed on us, and our 24/7 society have all imposed on us a rhythm of going to bed late and waking up late. And so many people think they're night owls when they actually aren't.
Hmm.
My daughter thought for many years that she was an owl, but has now discovered that she likes getting up earlier and she likes going to bed earlier. And it's been so healthy for her,
Hmm. That's
you
great.
know.
And I'm thinking of a particular client who, because I do know there are. So my question was one, I knew that you were going to answer that way. I anticipated that. So she was convinced her baby was a nighthawk. And I said, or an owl, just humor me for a few days or a week, move bedtime earlier. And let's just see, let's come with curiosity and see what will happen. And she's like, sure, okay, I'll play this game. We'll just see what happens. And within a few days, she said, oh my goodness, you're right. Bedtime for him much earlier fits so much better. His sleep is
Yeah.
more restful, less restless. And I thought, okay, it's not every kiddo. But the second layer to that, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this or your perspectives, but there are cultural differences in the way we
Yes.
sleep as well. And,
Yeah.
depending on where you're growing up and the culture of sleep, there are some
Mm,
cultures that are very, very, very late. Dinner is very late. Dinner ends up being when my bedtime is. I wonder your
yeah.
thoughts on this, from a cultural, anthropological level. It really just
Yeah.
pulls it all in.
Yeah. And I think, it's a fascinating thing to study and to look at not just the sleep, but also disease risk. And, so you might see that in the Mediterranean, they have a big siesta, so they eat later, so they go to bed later. But then they also have more community, they have a different kind of diet, so they have a different way of expressing themselves. And so they have a lower risk of heart disease, you know? So it's a multifactorial thing. Whereas you look at some of, like the UK, we don't have that sense of community necessarily. We follow a different kind of diet. We work more 24/7 and we don't have enough rest during the working day.
Mm.
I've done a TED talk, TEDx will come to work and rest because people have stopped taking their lunch breaks and their tea breaks and their coffee breaks, and they definitely don't have a siesta. So it increases their reliance on the nighttime sleep
Ah,
to
mm.
reduce their disease risk. Whereas in some of those cultures, because they have some other strategies, dietary, you know, um, spiritual, if you look at the Japanese as well, cultural, they don't have as great a reliance on the nighttime sleep. So it is such an interesting, a multifactorial, complex subject in
Ah,
itself.
that's interesting. I didn't know those. I hadn't considered those layers before. That's fascinating.
But even looking at things like emotions, and you look at the Italian types, for example, it's cliched, in Spanish, or the South American, ooh, eruptions. They're not really angry. They're just was the way they express themselves. Whereas in the British culture, if somebody did that, they're like, wow, they're really more repressive. We have a higher risk of disease, you
Huh.
know?
Hmm.
So it's so we will probably need more of the rebalancing phases of sleep reduce our coronary risk, heart time, more
Mm.
heart time needed, according to
Mm.
Chinese medicine. So yeah, it's so complex. It's
That's
beautifully
fascinating.
complex.
That, yeah, it would be interesting. I pull those pieces once in a while just because it is interesting to look into it, but I hadn't looked at it in that many layers. I wonder as we draw to a close, whether there is something, you and I have covered a lot of ground today, but is there something in general that we're not in general society talking about that you think should be more in the forefront and part of the conversation?
Yeah, it's a four-letter word. Okay, it's rest. It's rest. And I'm shooting myself in the foot slightly here as a sleep expert. The sleep industry is worth billions of dollars, billions of pounds. Mattresses, pillows, oils, all kinds. I know I've got these devices too.
Mhm.
And actually, what it is at the core is rest. If we could just live our lives more restfully, we would sleep better. Actually, a lot of these industries would collapse, but
Mhm.
probably. But if we could just live our daytime hours in a different way, we would have less reliance on the sleep. But then if you get into what do you mean by rest, then that's a whole other set of conversations. It's resting the mind, it's resting the body, it's resting in trust, it's resting in surrender, it's letting go.
Mm. Yeah, it doesn't
It
just mean sitting down.
doesn't just mean sitting down. And I'm at this age where I'm still learning what it means to live my life restfully because I'm now getting to the age where, I love what I do. I cannot see myself ever retiring, but I'll need to be more clever and canny about how I expend my energy as I get older, given the things that I love doing. So, how can I be more restful as I go about my day so that I can be more of service or
Mm.
enjoy my life more? If I would still want to go dancing as I do, or clubbing and climbing and swimming in rivers and things as I do. If I still want to do the things I love doing, it comes with the need for more restoration that goes beyond getting a good night's sleep.
Mm. I love that. Especially as I think about the mothers that I work with who are exhausted and sleep deprived and have segmented sleep, to go back to looking at how rest can weave through your day, even if it's rest while you meditate as you wash the baby bottles, or respect what your body needs, or take that deep breath at the front door with keys in hand. That pause before you head out to buckle your kiddo in the car seat. That's absolutely lovely. That's a wonderful note to finish on. Where can people find you if they want to know
So
more?
I'm on most of the usual social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I don't do Snapchat and TikTok. I don't know. I'm resisting. But I'm at Dr. Nerina at Dr. Nerina, so if that's in the show. And then I have a website, www.drnerina.com, drnerina.com. But if you just Google me, you'll find me. And yeah, I'm very findable, which is great. And there's 4 books, and there's another one in the pipeline. So watch the
Oh,
space, which
lovely.
will be very relevant for parents. And yes, very
Lovely.
relevant. I'm not a parenting expert, but what I talk about, I guess I'm a nervous system expert. So if you wanted
Yes.
to
And
hone in
it
on that,
comes down, parenting comes down to the nervous system. I really
it
do
does.
believe that.
It absolutely does. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today. This was an absolute pleasure to dig into sleep and the nervous system this way. I am grateful for your time.
Thank you so much, Heather. And I'm opening in the autumn a program as well, and I will keep you posted on that because
Please
it's
do.
about empowering people to become their own sleep coaches.
That
When I
sounds
work with
intriguing.
people, I very rarely work with anyone for more than 1 to 3 sessions. What I'm trying to do is to help them become their best sleep coaches because I don't think they need me,
Mm.
actually. The wisdom is within them.
That is such a, I know from the beginning of my career, my boss gave me very good advice that the first thing you should be doing with a client is seeing a path to where they don't need you. And that
Yes,
was
absolutely.
powerful advice to get as a new OT.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful.
And I hate creating that dependence. If people think they need to see me over and over again, I haven't done my job well,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not the right person for them.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
again.
Thank you so much for your time, Heather. I loved your questions. I've loved them. Brilliant start to my week.
Oh, well, wonderful. I'm glad.
Okay.
Bye for
Take
now.
care. Have an amazing week. Bye bye.
You too.
Bye bye.
Thank you for joining me on this episode. I do hope that you found the information and perspectives in this podcast episode helpful to you as you navigate your baby's sleep development. Of course, this podcast provides general information and it isn't tailored to your family's reality or the specific needs of your baby. If you're concerned about your baby's sleep or health, be sure to reach out to your healthcare provider. If you're feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and you need a place to feel nurtured and reassured, you can find me on Instagram at familysleep.ca. Until next episode, look for the connections that support you and your baby.